So we're left with a profound question. What happened to them? One theory is a dark conspiracy, that their work was too dangerous to be made public, so they were silenced. But another, more poetic theory suggests something else entirely. Perhaps they weren't silenced at all. Perhaps they simply learned how to step outside the very matrix they had worked so hard to describe. Welcome to the Last Guru podcast, the podcast for all those curious and passionate about spirituality, which explores human potential from an evolutionary perspective, but also helps address life's practical problems at a higher level of knowledge. Today, we're asking a pretty wild question. What if our whole understanding of reality was just plain wrong, built on a dangerously incomplete foundation? We're going to dive deep into the work of some incredible scientists who claimed they had actually decoded the hidden architecture of consciousness. And these discoveries were so profound, so earth-shattering, that they grabbed the attention of intelligence agencies and might have ended up costing these scientists their lives.
This quote here comes from a really surprising source. Federico Faggin, the inventor of the microprocessor, the guy who literally built the foundation of our digital world. And he's saying, we've got it all backwards. We think this physical material world is the real deal, but he suggests it's just an output, that it's born from a much, much deeper reality, one that's made of consciousness and interconnected fields.
Okay, so let's really get into this. The classical old-school way of looking at the world has a pretty simple rule. If you can't measure it, well, it doesn't really exist. It's a view that sees the universe as this giant computer, just bits and bytes, ones and zeros. But what if that view is missing the most important part of the entire equation?
Now, what's so fascinating here is just how different these two views are. On the one hand, you've got the classical view. It's a world of separate things, disconnected objects that you can measure and predict. It's neat, it's tidy. But then you look at the quantum view, and it completely flips the script. It says that consciousness isn't just some random byproduct of brain chemistry. It's the source code. It's the very foundation of reality itself.
And this is just a beautiful way to put it. Think about it. In quantum physics, things aren't really things at all. They're just states of a field. You can't take a wave out of the ocean, right? The wave is the ocean. And in the same way, this perspective says you can't separate your own consciousness from the universal field it comes from. You're not some machine in a box. You're a living, breathing, dynamic part of everything. So, if we are part of this universal field, how do we actually connect with it? How do we feel it? Well, this brings us to our first key figure, an inventor and scientist named Itzhak Bentov. And he had this radical idea that the human body isn't just a hunk of biology. It's a precision instrument, finely tuned to perceive this deeper reality. Bentov basically mapped out what he called a cosmic feedback loop right inside of us. It all starts with the heartbeat. That simple rhythm sends this tiny, measurable wave all the way up the spine, and that little movement creates vibrations in the brain, which then syncs up our brain waves with our body's own electromagnetic field. Now here's the kicker. He believed that when this whole system is perfectly in tune, it literally turns us into a cosmic antenna, allowing us to resonate with the frequencies of the universe itself.
And this is where the story takes a really dark, tragic turn. After spending decades decoding this hidden architecture of consciousness, Bentov was finally on his way to present his unified theory to the world. He was ready to show everyone what he'd found, but he never got there. The plane he was on crashed, and his complete theory basically died with him.
Bentov's death, it raises a really chilling question. Why would a guy studying consciousness and meditation be so important that his death seems, suspiciously timed? The answer, it seems, lies in how this knowledge could be used, not for enlightenment, but for control.
So years later, documents get declassified, and we learn about this, the gateway process. This was a real CIA program built on concepts that were almost identical to Bentov's. But they weren't interested in cosmic unity. No, they were interested in strategic assets. They wanted to know if they could use this body-mind resonance to see things from far away. In other words, to spy.
This really frames the central conflict perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got scientists like Bentov who are trying to expand human potential, to understand our place in the cosmos. And on the other side, you've got an intelligence agency looking at the exact same principles and asking a very different question. How can we turn this into a weapon?
And this is the core principle they were operating on. And listen, don't think for a second this is just some dusty old Cold War history. Think about our world right now. The algorithms that decide what you see in your news feeds, what you watch online, they are designed to do the exact same thing, to subtly shape your perception in order to influence your reality, your behavior.
The tools are more advanced, sure, but the goal is exactly the same. But Bentov wasn't the only one exploring these ideas. Decades before the movie made it famous, another brilliant scientist, Jacopo Grinberg, was describing our world as a kind of matrix, and he believed he was on the verge of actually proving it.
Grinberg's syntheurgic theory is absolutely mind-bending. He proposed that the universe is made of this fundamental grid of information. He called it a lattice. And our brains, he argued, don't actually create our reality. They act more like receivers, just tuning in and decoding a tiny fraction of this universal lattice, translating it into the world we see and feel. We aren't generating the signal, we're just tuned to the broadcast.
So to prove this, Grinberg designed his absolutely incredible experiment. He'd have two people meditate together to create a bond, a connection. Then he'd separate them into these totally isolated, electromagnetically shielded rooms called Faraday cages, which basically block all known signals from getting in or out. One person was shown random flashes of light, while Grinberg monitored the brain activity of the other person.
And the result was just staggering. In a quarter of the cases, 1 out of every 4, the second person's brain produced a reaction at the exact same moment the first person saw the flash of light. Now, according to everything we think we know about physics, this should be impossible. There was no physical way for a signal to get from one to the other, yet their brains were acting as one. For Grinberg, this was it. This was the proof of the lattice, a direct, non-local connection between two minds.
And just like Bentov, Grinberg was right there. He was on the cusp of a world-changing breakthrough. He was getting ready to do a huge, large-scale experiment to prove his theory to a skeptical world once and for all. But he, too, would never get the chance.
You just can't ignore the parallels here. And honestly, they're deeply unsettling. You have two brilliant men who dedicated their lives to understanding the fundamental nature of reality, and both of them meet their end right at the very moment they were about to provide the proof. Bentov in a plane crash, and Grinberg, in 1994, he just vanished, without a trace. So we're left with this huge, profound question. What happened to them? One theory is, of course, a dark conspiracy, that what they found was just too dangerous, too destabilizing to be made public, and so they were silenced. But there's another theory, a more poetic one, and it suggests that maybe they weren't silenced at all. Maybe they just learned how to step outside of the very matrix they had worked so hard to describe.
In the end, the story of these scientists leaves us with this powerful thought. It's a reminder that what we perceive as reality is just a fraction of what's really there. And maybe, just maybe, the most important truths are the ones that exist just beyond the veil of what we can currently see or measure or find. We look forward to seeing you at the next episode of The Last Guru, to live with passion. Because when the veil falls, trust and surrender reveal that no one is ever alone and never has been.